Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tigers.
Welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode of the Fly Culture Podcast. We got a little bit of rain here. So this has been recorded on the 7th of August, Saturday morning. And I thank my guests very kindly for making the time to speak with me on a Saturday morning. But I'm hoping to do some salmon fishing tomorrow. And the rain, I'm hoping, will help things a little bit. I also, if you listen to the last podcast, I'm hoping if we get some settled weather as well to tackle some mullet, because you probably gathered from that how much I enjoyed that and how much fun it was. And I think that's something that I'm really looking to try and learn some more about. And I think that's one of the things I really love about fly fishing is that you never stop learning. And this is another aspect that I've been aware of for a number of years, but haven't tackled it in this particular way with fishing for mullet with some nymphs, basically. So that is the plan for the coming fishing. But today I'm really pleased to be joined by fly angler, fly tyer and YouTuber Lindsay Simpson. I plan to learn about his fishing career along with plenty more. Lindsay, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me this morning. It's very, very kind of you. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Pete, and thanks very much for asking me along. I think before we started, I said I'm a bit of a fan of the podcast. It keeps me company while I walk the dog of an afternoon. So, it's great to actually be on. I'm a bit starstruck.
Don't be silly. You're more than welcome. And I'm pleased. The feedback I get from people is that, I might be cutting the grass, I might be walking the dog, I'm going to work, and it takes hopefully people to the water where they can, if they're not able to get there themselves, that hopefully it's the next best thing. But how's your season been? Has it been, I know we were talking off mic and you said it's pouring down with rain there at the moment. How's your season been?
Yeah, it's been, because I do a multitude of different sort of fishing. So early season, I kind of got locked into the loch style because the large reservoirs were producing amazing sport, and I spent quite a lot of time on them. And then as the weather heats up, I tend to start gravitating towards the river because you can still get good sport there. But I believe this season, a lot of the reservoirs have continued to fish well, even through the heat, So, and my fishing, it's been a bit strange. So yesterday, I think, and it was purely by accident, I went to do a video on the River Avon and forgot all my camera kit. So I ended up just fishing, and it's the first time I've just been fishing this year, because generally I'm going and I'm making videos, and I realised yesterday actually how much I miss it, because when you're making videos, you're either making a video or you're fishing, and the two of them don't particularly marry well. You don't do either well. If you're concentrating on one, the other one lacks, and so my fishing suffered a bit, if I'm honest. And I think you've got a bit of skill fade there, and that might just be me, but I certainly feel like I'm not at the top of my game like I used to be, and it's due to the fact I'm not doing enough fishing. I'm doing too much filmmaking, but I really enjoy that as well, So it's a double-edged sword. You've got to take the good with the bad.
You make some really interesting points there, and I was saying to Emma, I was thinking about going fishing yesterday for trout, and I said to her, I can't remember the last time I caught a trout, because we've had, like you say, this weather that has just been all over the place. And I think I mentioned on one of the previous podcasts that that's one of the cool things about it, and you're alluding to the same, that you might do some lock style stuff early on and then swing around. And I think I consider myself a trout angler first and foremost, but I like everything. Every aspect of it is really, really good. But I've been doing a little bit more salmon. I've been fishing somewhere else. So I've been throwing a double hander a fair bit. And I think if we get some settled weather, I'll be back on the trout again. But I also understand exactly what you say about videoing your fishing and how you approach it. And I know, having done the mullet one the other weekend, that the guys were really super keen for us to catch some fish. The conditions were really, really difficult. And I wasn't in the slightest bit bothered, because I'm sort of from the school that if a fish is really hard to catch, I kind of like to earn them. And I was really lucky that I had Colin and Paul with me that made it a lot easier. But flitting between the two, and like you say, catching for camera, catching for microphone is a completely different, not completely, but it's a very different form of fishing, isn't it, when you're actually doing it?
Yeah, well, I think what you've always got to be thinking is, well, how, what I'm always thinking about, rather than was that a take, I'm thinking, oh, is that shot framed? Have I recorded the sound properly? And I'm sure with a podcast, you'll appreciate, Pete, that, sound is one of the most important things. So I'm always checking the mics, checking the levels, and, I don't know how many times, oh man, I've missed another one, But it's all part and parcel of it, I suppose. And what I'm trying to do with the videos is educate people and encourage them to give it a go. And I've had lots of positive feedback. You get the odd person that say, "Oh, you're talking out your backside," but hey, I'm fairly thick-skinned, so I don't mind that, and I want to have a laugh while I'm doing it. People might take me the wrong way, or I don't know if it's just my manner, but I have got a great sense of humour, and I'm always up for a laugh. So, that's what the education piece is about, as well as the entertainment piece.
And I think that's the really nice thing about it is, sometimes I sort of blow hot and cold with, I won't call you, I suppose YouTube is social media in some respects, but I sort of blow hot and cold about it. But the way to educate and using a format to educate people, I think is a really cool thing about it, isn't it? And to be able to share a passion, share a love. You mentioned the comments. I suspect I get it. I reckon it's the same guy. He goes around a lot of them, and I had one the other day from him. And I know Pete McLeod does as well. And he sort of comments on a load of those sorts of things. So, yeah, I had one the other day.
I'm sure they're not using the real names, Pete, some of them.
I don't think so.
Because there's a few, well, obviously, I don't know if you've seen anything, but because of lockdown this year, I organised a sort of virtual fly tying demonstration, and Davey McPhail was good enough to come on board. We had guys from America, and we did a day where videos were back to back. And so I got chatting to fellow YouTubers. It was really interesting, actually, and it was amazing how many came up with the same name for the derogatory comments. And I thought, I know exactly who that is, because I've had similar sort of things. And that's people's business. If you want to build a fake account so that you can write some nonsense on a website, then you need to get out fishing more, is what I would suggest, rather than waste your time doing that. But the good, I remember when I signed up for Facebook, which wasn't that long ago, actually, in comparison to life, I think it's maybe 10 years. And a guy, a good salmon angler, and there used to be a gilly, Jock Ryan, he said to me, "Oh, you've signed up for Facebook." He goes, "I'll give you this advice, Lindsay," and I've stuck with it. He said, "Take the good from social media, because there is a lot of good, information, people trying to educate, ideas flies." He goes, "And just ignore all the nonsense," and there's quite a considerable amount of that. And I've kind of stuck to that sort of, I don't get involved with politics, I don't get involved with religion, and unless someone asks me, I won't give them my opinion on competition fishing, for example, I just do what I do. If people like it, great. And if they don't, oh, well, they can jog on. I don't, it's no skin off my nose.
Yeah. And I think
I'm probably, sorry.
I think you're dead right about, when you do get people sort of make comments and stuff. And I'm sure yours is very similar to mine, that people enjoy what you put out. So 99.9% of feedback is really, really good. But I guess the view I've sort of taken with these things is that if you put it out there, if you can't deal with something coming back, then don't do it. That's probably the easiest way to look at it. And that's how I sort of kind of like it. But I always try and steer clear of going down these sorts of wormholes at the moment. But we'll come on to the videos a little bit later. But you've talked about your lock style fishing and then going on to the rivers. But to give somebody a base, given your accent as well. Whereabouts are you actually based, so people can get a sense of where you are and where you're fishing?
Yeah, it's funny because when I go to places like Rutland and that, and some people will chat to me and say, "Oh, when did you come down?" I say, "No, I've come up," because I'm actually based in Camberley in Surrey. So I joined the army as a young lad. I was in the army at 15, and I moved around various countries, Germany, and I was in Scotland for a few years. But in the end, and by what I mean in the end, when I decided to leave the army, I was in Purbright in Surrey. My wife got a job as a customs and excise officer, and then I got a job working for the Ministry of Defence. And we just sort of settled here. Then we had children, and and I can't see myself moving now. The downside to that, Pete, is the nearest water to me is an hour's drive. Rivers, I'm looking at an hour. The large still waters, I'm looking at probably an hour and a half to 2 hours. But I am kind of central for so Rutland, Gratham, Chew, Buell, Hanningfield. Not that I venture there much anymore, I'm afraid. But I've got that. River-wise, I've got the Avon, I've got the Wiley, and I'm a member of the Salisbury District Club, which gives me access to a lot of them waters. Affordable access. I'm sure you're aware that the price of fishing up on the chalk streams is extortionate, to say the least. The only time I get on the river test, because people say, "Oh, you must fish the test all the time," and that's just not the case. I get on the test in October when John Hall and Ben Bangham run the Grayling Classic competition, and I don't do it so much for the competition. I do it for the access to the river that week, because they give you a discounted ticket to fish for Grayling. So I think it's around £25 a day. So I take a week off work and just go every day just to enjoy it. It's a fabulous stretch of river, but it's really the only time of year I can justify the cost,
I seem to remember you did a video from there, didn't you? From coming into that.
I did one last year, yeah. And it was strange because we still had a lot of the COVID restrictions. But Ben and Adam, they just done such a good job at keeping people distanced. And Adam's still in the army. Well, he might be out now, but I think last year he was still in the army, so he did his sergeant major bit. Anyone got too close, it was, "Guys, you two get 2 meters apart." And so they've done a fabulous job, and they run. So they call it a competition, but it's more like a social, Pete. You meet up with guys that love grayling fishing, and there is some amazing fish come off the test. I mean, it's not uncommon to catch grayling between 40 and 48 centimetres on that stretch of the river, which are bloody good fish. So it's always great to attend that one. I'm hoping that it'll go ahead this year.
Great. And you also mentioned
a very popular competition.
Cool. You mentioned also the Avon, and I guess reading between the lines, your background, military, would that be Frank Sawyer's bit of the Avon that you are very fortunate to fish too?
No, I'm not a member. So that is the Services Dry Fly Club. I'm not a member of that, and the reason for that is I'm still part of the MOD as a civil servant, and sort of the grade I'm at is equivalent to a major in the regular army, and the Services Dry Fly water charge you as your rank. Now, although the grade might be that, I'm certainly not getting a major's wages, and I just can't justify the cost again. Whereas Salisbury District, I think it's, what did I pay, £250 for a year. When I tell some of my northern friends that I paid that, they think I'm off my head, because they're paying £6 to £11 for a day out. A season ticket's 65, 70 quid, and I'm going, what? Unbelievable. But that's the price of living in the south, I suppose.
Yeah. And so are you from, let's go down your timeline a little bit. Are you from a family of anglers? Is that where the fishing bug came from, or was it something that developed a little bit later? And if it was a little bit later, how did you find it?
Well, I didn't really fish as a kid. I played a lot of football and sports, and then I joined the army, and then I ended up being posted to a depot where they trained junior soldiers, and I met a friend that's still a great friend today, a guy called Ronnie Christie, and we done a lot of training together. I was always lacking in the fitness department, and Ronnie was a fit guy, and he would always sort of look after me. We'd go running and I'd teach him to play squash, and we got on. We were great pals. And one afternoon I said, "Oh, we're playing squash." He says, "No, I'm going fishing." And I said, "You what?" He goes, "Oh, I'm going fishing. Do you want to come along?" I said, "Well, okay." So I went along to the Stillwater, sat and watched Ronnie fishing. And he said, "Oh, do you want to have a go?" I said, "Well, I can't cast." And he goes, "Oh, I can teach you to cast and that. It's no bother." And he says, "The Army's actually got a fishing team. You know, you might want to have a look into that." He says, "It's days off work." And days off work, oh, give me the rod, show me what to do. And then afterwards, I think I bought a Bob Church Boron. It was my first fly rod. And it's probably like a broom handle now, but, you know, it was the rod I got. And Ronnie taught, we had a big hangar at ITB Euston where they used to do PT and the wet weather program. So I learned to cast in an aircraft hangar, basically. And so I learned all the basics. And I think the very first place I caught a fish was Jubilee Lakes up in Northumberland.
Yep.
And I caught a fish. So I'd gone twice and caught nothing and watched all these people catching lots of fish. And I thought, maybe I'm just not going to be very good at this. And I should just pack up now while I've spent very little money, because I'm a bit tight, you know. So I'm fishing away. And Ronnie said, "Look, I've got to go to the toilet. Could you just hold my rod?" And I said, "Oh yeah, can I hear?" And he goes, "Just pull it back." And I've got one, Ronnie. You know, I've got one. No, Ronnie's caught a fish and just passed me the rod. But you know, after that, I thought, well, this is brilliant, you know. And then I wanted to get better, and so at the time I was the master tailor at Euston, and Ronnie said, "Well, you'll pick up fly tying, no bother." So he sat me down behind his vice, said, "This is what you do." And, you know, I took to it like a duck to water. And I really enjoyed that because I've always been, you know, I like doing things with my hands. And so fly tying was just great for me. It's like, what it's like now actually is smoking. You know, that's what it's like, you know, I'm lucky enough to be in a big office when I was at work. And I've got my fly tying kit beside my work desk. And every sort of 20 minutes or so, I'll just tie a fly. Something will come in my head. "Oh, let me try this. Oh, nah, that's not quite right. Do a little bit more work. Oh, I'll just fiddle with that pattern until I'm happy with what I've got." So the fly tying came really easy. And it kind of came along the same timeline as the fishing. So slowly but surely, I would, there was no YouTube back then, obviously. I would trout fishermen, all the mags. "Oh, I like the look of that. How have they done that?" And just try to figure it out, you know. And that's how it worked. So I'd done that, and then after about a year of sort of doing the puddle bashing, Ronnie said, "Right, I'll take you down to the Army Championships down to Rutland." And so we went to Rutland, and I'm looking at Rutland thinking, you're having a laugh. How are you meant to find fish in that? It's like the North Sea, you know? And he goes, "Oh, no, it's fine, you'll be fine." And so I went out in a boat with another guy who had a bit more experience than me. And I always remember catching my first Rutland fish, thinking, I've caught a whale. This thing must be massive, because the rod had buckled right over. And I'm holding on for dear life with my 15-pound tippet material, knowing that it's never going to snap. But I'm thinking, I've never had a fish like this. And I'd caught a few fish at this point up in the small still waters. And I got it in, and it was maybe 2 pounds. And I thought, what? I don't understand how that 2 pound fish could have done that. And all the other fish I've caught are sort of, but the difference, obviously, you know, they've got a lot more water. The fish at Rutland are superb quality anyway. And this one had probably been overwintered. It was a beautiful bar of silver. It looked completely different. And after that, I think I kind of fell in love with the loch style fishing. And, you know, and within 2 or 3 years, I stopped going to the small still waters and concentrated on the loch style side of life. And Rutland was always my favourite. As the years have progressed, it seems to take much longer to drive there now. You know, traffic cameras, how busy the roads are, and I'm starting to go less and less, which is a real shame. I wished I lived a little closer, but Grafham's not too bad. And again, I really enjoy fishing up there. It's a great place. The Anglian Waters, they do run great fisheries. You know, they've got them well stocked, and they've got them well facilitated. You know, there was always a nice tackle shop. The boats are well maintained. It's just a good place to go fishing. So I did a lot of that, and then when I was about 40-year-old. I'd fished a couple of times for England by that point, and I thought, well, you know, I'm an absolute fishing nut, Pete. You know, if I'm not fishing, I'm thinking about fishing, and if I'm not thinking about it, I'm watching it. So I was getting a bit bored over the winters, and I thought, well, what can I do in the winter? You know, because the fisheries would have a proper closed season. And one of my friends said, well, why don't you try grayling fishing, you know, on the river? And so I went. I'd got what did I start with? A Gray's Streamflex 10 foot for a 4. I've still got it in the garage, actually. It feels like a broom pole now compared to all the modern trendy rods. But so I started doing a little bit of grayling fishing on Werwell, and that was pretty reasonable at the time. I think it was £16 to go grayling fishing for the day, which was pretty reasonable. And so I started doing that in the winter. My friend said, oh, why don't you do the qualifiers to get in the England River Stream? I said, oh, I'm not, you know, this was just something to kill time in the winter. I don't really want to do that. And he goes, but you'll learn so much quicker. And, you know, I'm all about trying to get better at stuff and learning. So I said, right, I'll do the qualifiers. And, you know, lo and behold, the first time I done it, I got to the final. And it was on the River Tees, which I don't know if you've been up there, Pete, but it's nothing like Werwell. You know, no. You're looking at a canal-y, tiny, easy to wade bit of water, and then the River Tees. So that was an education, you know. I think the very first angler I controlled was Mike Tinian, who had multiple caps at that point. So watching him fishing, I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, this is unbelievable, you know. And then I think the next guy I controlled was a lad called Alex Bobba, who, again, multiple capped angler. Just the learning curve was like that. And I'm sort of 15 years into river fishing, and I still consider myself a beginner, you know. And it's probably due to the people I fish with. They're all sort of ninjas on the river. But it's just, I really, really enjoy it. And I used to always go with a friend, go to the river fish, because then I could learn, you know, oh, how you doing that, what you doing. But now I really enjoy my own company. So I'll go and just spend 3 or 4 hours, maybe just, and I'll always do something. I think it's fun. So I'll say, right, there's 100 metres of river. From that tree to that tree, I'm going to spend 3 hours fishing that. And I'm going to fish every single bit of that river and try and get the most out of it. Or like yesterday, I went yesterday and I said, right, I want to catch 3 species in an hour. I didn't have long because the weather was coming at 1. I thought, right, I'm going to have 3 species in an hour and then just work out how best to do that. So I always set myself little challenges and make it, you know, I keep it fun, you know.
That's nice. I like that. And I do similar. I might just roll cast or I might do whatever. And just to keep it interesting, like you say, you learn those ways as well. There's a couple of interesting things you brought out of this. And I'm not in the competition scene, so I don't know. I know some of the people you've mentioned there. But it does seem interesting that you say about Werwell. And I don't know, as an outsider thinking about that as well, it just suddenly when you mentioned that and said the tees, which I fish, which I love very, very much, I fished 2 or 3 times and really, really liked it, that you'd almost think that if you were selecting team for, let's say it's wherever in Eastern Europe, you'd hold the qualifiers in an area with similar sort of water, I guess, wouldn't you? That would be a good way to get, like you say, people who were au fait with that sort of water in the background that you were actually going to fish. Do you think that's something worth thinking about? Because like you say, Wherewell, and I remember the Robbie days of Wherewell, that it was probably, I think in fishing, one of the worst kept secrets, wasn't it?
Well,
Yeah. So do you think that's something to think about?
I think with the competition fishing, I mean, I was doing it just to try and improve it, and it's not worked. I still think I'm rubbish. But the thing is, I was a grayling angler, and then I went up to the River Tees, and you've got to try and catch trout. So it's a completely different ballgame with different flies and different tactics. So what I did, because I was doing river fishing as my winter pastime, I fished a lot for grayling, and I got really good at that because I was doing it every week. But then I got up to the Tees and I was completely out of my depth. And I still find that for trout on a river, I am a little bit out of my depth. I feel like, when I'm doing the YouTube videos, actually, I sometimes feel like a bit of an imposter. They say it's imposter syndrome because when I catch a fish, I'm often more surprised than anyone else that I've managed to catch one. But I do actually know what I'm doing. I'm just not very good at applying it sometimes. When I was really fishing at a high level in the loch style, I used to go into I don't know if you get it yourself, maybe with fishing, you just know when you're going to catch a fish. And I think people that compete will know what I'm talking about. You get to a level where you're fishing and you can just, it's almost sense, right, now's now, and then your rod will buckle over and you're playing a fish. Now with loch style fishing, I used to get to that sort of feeling. Yep, any minute, bang, yep, there we go, I've got one. Next one. And the guy, my boat partner, would go, "How do you know?" And I said, I can't explain it to you. I said, I don't know whether the fish's tail slapped the fly and I felt the minuscule feeling and I just know it's there. But you get to that level and you just know. And and when you're fishing like that, it's a confidence and you're just on a high, and you're buzzing. And I used to get that with the loch style. I've never got to that level with the river. So I've never felt, right, this one, I'm definitely going to get a fish. Or I've never walked up to a seam of water where I know there should be fish lying and going, right, I'm going to get one here. I've suspected sometimes, but I've never had the confidence to say, right, are you watching? I'm going to catch a fish here. Whereas some of my friends, they're just phenomenal. They're not human, some of them. I remember, so not long after I'd learned my first season grayling fishing, my friend said, "Well, I'm going to Slovenia for my 40th birthday. Do you want to come?" I said, "Well, what is it?" He said, "It's river fishing." I said, "Well, I don't really know what I'm doing, but yeah, I'll come along." And he goes, "Oh, it's all right, I'll look after you. I'll teach you the ropes and stuff." And so we got a guide. We hired a guide, and he said, "Look, this guy's really inexperienced. Can you show him some bits and bobs?" So I went away with a guide. We spoke pretty broken English, but and obviously I've got a Scottish accent, so the communication wasn't great. But we managed to get by. And then lunchtime came, and I've wandered up and I'm cock a hoop. I've caught 7 fish. I'm like, I've got 7. I'm really pleased. I said I had one about £2, and they were like, "Oh, well done, Lindsay, well done." And everyone else is dead. There was 3 others in the group, all dead quiet. And I said, "Well, how have you boys got on?" And my pal Graham said, "Well, I've had 54. And I was like, "Shut up, 54. Don't be stupid." And James Gardner, one of my other friends, said, "Well, I've had 43. And the other lad had about 30. And I'm thinking, well, what am I doing wrong? And so what I could do is I could fish dry flies, because dry fly fishing on a river is very similar to fishing dry fly from a boat, which I could do. So, but they were fishing with nymphs. And they said, "Well, this is how you do it. We call it timed strike." I said, "Oh, okay." And so he goes to this seam, and this is what I was alluding to earlier. He says, right, watch. And he goes, nymphs in, 1, 2, lift. And he'd pull out a fish. And I was going, well, how did you know the fish was there? He goes, well, I've counted to 2 seconds. I'm fishing with a 4mm tungsten bead. I know the fly's gone down. The fish has had enough time to take it. I've lifted. I've got the fish. I goes, you're just winding me up. So he does it again. 1, 2, fish. I was like, I can't get my head around that. He goes, no, it works, watch. For a third time, 1, 2, fish. He goes, right, you come and have a try. So I've gone 1, 2, nothing. 1, 2, nothing. I said, you've caught all the fish in this seam, obviously. He goes, no, I've not. Watch. And he does 1, 2, fish. 1, 2, fish. And I've gone, so he's now got 5 fish out the seam. He goes, it's full of fish, Lindsay. Come try again. 1, 2, nothing. 1, 2, no. And I goes, I can't do it. He goes, look, anyone can do it. And he shouted over this other boy, Graham Sharp, his name is. He says, right, Graham, what I want you to do is pitch your nymphs in, count to 2, and catch a fish. And he went, okay. He went 1, 2, and Graham caught a fish. And I'm going, oh, for God's pulling my hair out. And I had to walk away. And I thought, it's like a black art. How do you do this? But, over the years, that technique, I have worked on it, and it does work. And, if you think about it, how he was explaining it is absolutely right. A fish in a river has got literally a microsecond to decide whether it's going to take something. So if you're counting to 1, 2 and then lifting, very often you'll have a fish on the end. But Slovenia was an absolute eye-opener to the possibilities of going to destinations fishing. And from there, obviously, I did quite a lot of travelling to rivers around Europe and stuff. And I was supposed to be going to Michigan in October, but unfortunately that's been kiboshed due to the COVID restrictions. So that's been put over till next year.
And Michigan, I think, is a hot spot for brook trout as well, isn't it? For sizable brook trout, if I'm right in thinking that.
Yeah, there's a certain there's brook trout, there's brown trout, they've got salmon, and we were supposed to be going in October, which was a really good time for salmon. The friend I was going with, he's been before, and the river was the Pierre Marquette. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's. I was really looking forward to it. It's a bit of a blow, actually, but we've got great fishing in this country. There's no reason why I can't get myself off somewhere else and have a little fishing holiday in October.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's come back, because you spoke a bit there about some technique, and I think some of the listeners might be interested in that. And I was thinking about what you were saying about the 1-2 thing and, the inducing and everything else that went with it. And I guess looking at that background and the process, your learning process, predominantly from rivers with very experienced competition anglers, do you find as a result of that you may make fly changes quicker? And one of the other things I'm really interested in, that you said, and rightly so, that the fish has just a very, very short amount of time to see that fly. Do you think those minutiae changes, be they minuscule differences in leader diameter, whatever they may be, in that, given that window's so small, do you think then that would make that much difference? Because I'm coming to the conclusion it may not be, but I would love an argument the other way, and I get with minute periods of time for the fish to see the fly, that a trigger point might work really well on that basis as well, but there'll be times when, drabber patterns, etc., etc., etc. How do you feel about that, given what you just said along those sorts of lines? Because that sort of conversation really fascinates me.
Yeah, I think the key to the whole thing, Pete, in my humble opinion, I'm no expert, but it is definitely confidence. If you believe something, then more often than not, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I believe if I'm going to take off my 3.5mm tungsten nymph and put on a 4mm tungsten nymph, it's going to get to the fish quicker. And then, if I get one maybe first chuck or get an offer, Well, that proves me right. So that change has obviously made a difference. Now, with the diameter of tippet, you mentioned diameter of tippet there. I'm a great believer in fishing as thin as possible. Now, I wouldn't advocate that for a beginner, because very often if you strike too hard, you're going to leave a hook in the fish's mouth and not catch the fish. But if you've got the correct action rod combined with the thinnest diameter you can get away with for the particular fish you're targeting, then I think it does make a difference. Now, I don't believe for a minute that the fish care about the diameter of the tippet. I don't think they see it particularly. But what I do think makes a difference is the way the nymph moves on different diameter tippet. And that's something I took from loch style fishing many years ago, fishing a single fly. So I don't know if you've heard of an angler called Peter Appleby.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Apps.
He's quite a famous, the Apps bloodworm. Yeah. So Peter, he came up with a technique while loch style fishing, and it was the single blob technique. So, and when I heard about it, I just thought it was a myth. But I was lucky enough to end up fishing in a team with Peter, and I've sat beside him while he's doing it, and it's absolutely phenomenal to watch. But what he does is he's got about 20 foot of tippet at £5 breaking strain, and just a single blob. And he throws it out on a DI5 expert, and he just does sort of short, sharp pools 6 inches long, and it looks like and he'll go, yep, there's a fish there. And it's the same thing with, Graham saying to me, 1-2 fish. Well, Peter, yep, one there, it's coming, it's going to come. Then he'll stop, and then his rod will just buckle over, and you go, how do you know? And it's that, again, the confidence and the experience to when that fish comes. But he was saying to me, the diameter of the tippet is key, because the fly will move differently to if I fish £12, for example, which is what you would think for somebody pulling a blob. But the thinner down you can go, and he says, you've got to remember there's no droppers, there's no knots, so you've got that tippet, it's straight, it's extremely strong. Very often when he was playing fish, he would have the tippet in his finger, because he's played it, and to land the fish, the tippet's got to be in his hand. So going back to the river scenario, I think that nymphs, you can imagine, it will move much more freely on a thinner diameter tippet. And people say to me, well, what breaking strain do you... I couldn't tell you what breaking strain, because I measure my tippets in diameter. So I generally, on the river, and I'm not catching huge fish. I don't like fishing for the stock fish in the Avon. I tend to stay away from it and try and get the wild fish, which are only about 6 inches. And I tend to fish 7X, which is 0.10. If I am near the stockies, I tend to come up to 0.12, just in case I get one, and that's ample to land a stockfish. In that flow of water on the Avon, I wouldn't fancy my chances on somewhere like the D or, the Tees, for example, a decent fish on the Tees. I don't think you'd hold it with 0.10.
I like those. Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. And I think I may have talked about this previously as well, is that confidence. And I think it's down to confidence. If, like you say, and I've talked before about patterns, that there's one that I don't think I catch fish on, so I don't fish it as well when I'm fishing it. And I think you're exactly right. I like what you say about the movement of the fly. I guess what I was saying, if we talk diameter 0.100 to 1.30, how much difference that would make to the movement of the fish. And I'd be fascinated to learn and understand that a little bit more. And I'm sure there'll be somebody much smarter than me will come out with right, we've looked at this and this kind of works. But I'm with you. I think it's confidence. And I think if you've got confidence in something, it works really, really well. So that's a really great answer, Lindsay. I really like that a lot. I think that's exactly, you've hit the nail on the head there for me.
Yeah. I think, I remember writing an article I think it was from my own website. I can't quite remember where it was published now, but it was to do with the weight on flies and sink rates and how flies sink. And there was a chap came on and said, well, you shouldn't be writing an article unless you know Archimedes' principle inside and out. And I thought, who's bloody Archimedes? No clue, but apparently it's to do with, a log weighs a ton, but it floats on the water sort of thing. And I didn't read Archimedes' principle because I've got a life, basically. So but I do take that, some flies will sink much quicker than others because of the way they're tied and the profile. And I'm always thinking about my fly tying as well, so I don't tend to copy traditional patterns particularly well. And I'm very envious of the professional fly tiers, that can tie 16 Invictas and they all look like peas in a pod. I think that's fantastic. That's not my bag. I tend to tie 2 or 3 flies and then I get a bit bored and I'll tie 2 or 3 different flies. I've got the attention span of a gnat. So, very envious of them boys that can knock out 20 of the same pattern in a oneer. I wished I could, but I can't.
I'm similar I've not tied a fly for 2 years now, I think. I've just lost the will to do it. And there's so many good fly ties out there that are knocking out this cottage industry business. I've been doing my best to try and support those. And like you, when I was fly tying, I was tying guide flies that I knew I was going to lose. Their life expectancy was very, very short because they were going to go in a tree. Scruffy worked really well. I've always been a subscriber to that, and that worked really well for me. But I've enjoyed, if I sit down at the Vice, mine sort of take a Darwinism natural selection, that there may be 2 the same, then there'll be a slight genetic change, and then they go off somewhere else. Yeah, and they go off somewhere else. So, but this segues really, really nicely, actually, because I wanted to thank you for the image you sent to me for Fly Culture that we had at the beginning there of a beautiful nymph that you'd beautifully photographed. And I really have enjoyed your photography as well. And that's another passion of yours. And for me, and I wonder if it was the same for yours, that we have a really photogenic quarry. We fish in beautiful places. Fly casting is photogenic as well. Is that what's drawn you to photography, or was that always something that you've done as well? Or did fly fishing, was that a way of you being able to express that?
I think I did. I did photography before I did fly fishing. So even as a young soldier, when you're in juniors, they've got to give you stuff to do in the evening to make sure you're not up to mischief. So they had hobbies, and I did a lot of photography there. And that's back in the good old days where it was film cameras. As you probably know, I'm quite old, so we didn't have any digital or any nonsense like that. But I remember getting my first digital camera thinking, wow, this is amazing. And it was like 1.7 pixels, which you're thinking now, the cameras that are available to you now are unbelievable. They you almost need very little skill to take quite amazing photographs. I mean, just even with a mobile phone, you can take some amazing pictures. But I don't know, I kind of drifted away from the landscape photography and got more into the macro. And that was probably to do with I wanted to take pictures of the flies. Initially, it was to share with teammates. So what we would do is we'd have team boxes of flies, and so people could see what you were tying. You could, and if I do anything, I want to do it particularly well. So I learned how to take macro photographs of flies. And I still quite enjoy that. There's something quite satisfying about making a fly, which, looking at it in the hand, it may just look it's a bit of fluff tied to a hook, but when you get right in close with a macro photograph, you can see all your flaws, which is not so good from my perspective, but you can see, it's a thing of beauty. Sometimes it's a right mess, but, either or. I've tied some monstrosities up in my time. Pete, I'm pretty guilty of being open-minded when it comes to fly patterns. You know, I don't mind tying snakes or humonguses, but I'm also quite prepared to tie a salmon fly. Just whatever floats my boat, really.
Nice. It was interesting. I'd written down about fly tying, and I wanted to talk to you about that. And I've written down here, my first fly looked like a sheep's turd. And that was my first attempt at it. And it was a nymph on a still water. And I actually caught a fish on it. So perhaps we need a sheep's turd pattern, which may be kind of interesting. But for me, I liked the way that you photographed that, because, you know, the traditional picture of a fly in a vice is really, really nice. Don't get me wrong. But you'd placed, there looked to me as though there was a lot of thought gone into the process of photographing it. So you'd done something different, that you'd made the fly wet and then placed it on a wet rock. And it had an orange bead on it, and it looked really, really good. Is that part of your process as well? You're looking to say, right, I'm going to photograph this fly, but I'm going to make it look how it would look in the water so people can see that, but also photograph it so it looks a little bit different.
I'm going to be giving you all my secrets away, Pete, but basically, I tie flies for fishing, and you won't see many of them in photographs because they're a bit boring. I'm going to be honest with you. My box of river flies consists mostly of weighted hare's ears. Generally speaking, there's a few other ones in there, but generally it's you'd look at them and just, you wouldn't bother. And then there's the flies for the camera. And, you know, people like to see fancy flies. They're not particularly effective in the water, is what I find. You know, they might look great, but they're not effective fish catchers. I mean, I think I've said this on my YouTube channel. Fly tying is a different hobby from fly fishing. And although they're closely related, they're not the same. You know, I really enjoy fly tying, but I could probably get away with 20 patterns for the river and the same for the loch style. And you know, but my fly boxes would be pretty boring. So that's why I do all the different patterns. And sometimes you do come up with a winner, you know. So I've tied some flies and thought, well, I'll give it a go. And it's just really worked well. And then it gets a permanent place in the box. But yeah, people need to realise that fly tying is a different hobby from fly fishing. And because folks say, oh, I'm going to tie that, so it'll be a killer. And I'm thinking, no, it won't, because I've tried fishing it and it's rubbish.
Yeah. I think simple is best, and I'm with you on that. I don't have many patterns at all that I use, variations of a pattern, but not great changes. For me, it's probably the pheasant tail. Funnily enough, my bogus fly is the hare's ear. But again, because I don't fish it very much, so that's why I don't catch many fish on it. And it's not for any reason that it's because it is a well-proven fly. But for me, you know, I was trying to think actually when I was guiding how many people have caught. I've guided probably with a pheasant tail and a variation of a pheasant tail, how many fish I've caught over 17 years, and I reckon it's a fair few. And it is one similar to that. I can't get it to work for me in the same way. I don't know where you're fishing, if there's more shrimp in the water or whatever. I don't know. But it just doesn't work for me in that same way. But again, it's psychological, and that comes back to that great tip that you gave about that. It's the same with the prince nymph. I think the prince nymph is a beautiful fly. I can catch fish in the States on it. Can I catch fish in the UK? Not many, no. But again, I don't fish it very often, so I'm not. It's not going to happen, is it?
Yeah, it's funny actually because and since starting up the YouTube, a lot of Americans have, you know, so they've got. I mean, a lot of them think they invented fly fishing, but, you know, some of the real arguments I've had was I'd done one and I just, what did I call it? Bread and butter. That's what. So it's just like, I could describe it in seconds. It's a jig hook, 3mm bead with some scruffy dubbing and a copper rib, and that's it. And I called it the bread and butter because that's what I have in my boxes all the time. And an American chap well, that's a waltz worm. It's just a fancy waltz worm, that. And I'm going, well, I didn't know what a waltz worm was. I had to look it up on the internet, you know, a waltz worm. I've never heard of that. But actually, it's just a a hare's ear. And I think a lot of people get very, very precious about the names of flies. I mean, I couldn't care less, perfectly honest. I tie a fly, I give it a name because then you can refer to it. But some people get a little bit precious about the names of things. I don't care. So anyone listening to this, you can call it what you like. I'll call it what I like, and we'll all be happy.
Cool. So you've alluded to, and we've chatted a little bit about the YouTube channel. How did that start for you? What was your thought process behind that, and what made you decide to do it?
Well, I decided to do it actually about 15 years ago. And so I started doing it, and it was a bit rubbish because I'm not saying it's any better now, but it was a lot more rubbish than it is now. And, my first kid was about 18 months old, and then my wife got pregnant again. And I just thought, you know what, I can't do it well, so I'm not going to do it. And I sort of shit-canned that. And down the line, I was watching a lot of Davy McPhail. He's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal, inspirational. And I thought maybe I could do this again, because I think I've got something to offer. I've got a lot of experience, and I can pretty much cobble fluff to a hook, and I know what I'm doing pretty much with the cameras. So I gave Davey a call. I said, look, Davey, I'm thinking about doing this YouTube thing, I think it'd be quite good. And so he gave me a load of advice about setting up and what to do. And, Lindsay, I hope you're not doing it because you think you'll make a living out of it, because that's just not the case. You need to be doing it because you want to do it to educate people. And I said, all right, that's fine. So that's about 3 years ago, and I spoke to Steve Cullen. I said, Steve, I'm thinking about starting a YouTube channel, just to help people with, basic fly tying stuff. And he went, well, it sounds like a lot of work. And I said, I'll be good. I've got the capacity, I've got the time, and I've got the inclination, so I'm going to give it a go. And so I started it off, and I was doing 2 fly tying videos a week, which was okay, because people thought, it must be a lot of work, but it wasn't actually a lot of work. It was just a case of sticking a camera in front of my vise and tying a fly. And, I do very little editing to the fly tying videos. It's pretty straightforward, Here's the fly I'm going to tie the fly, and it's like 10 minutes, and I top and tail it with an intro and an outro. So it was easy. And what I was doing was I'd get up at like 3 a.m, because that's when it was quiet, and I would knock out 5 or 6 videos and then schedule them to be released. And I really enjoyed doing that, and it was good, and I got a lot of positive feedback. And then people started asking about, well, the fishing. How do you fish this? And well, let's see what a day's fishing's like. And I thought, how could I do that? So I got myself a GoPro and various other bits and bobs, and I started doing little vlogs, if you like, about my day's fishing. And that kind of grew arms and legs. And the fishing videos were much more popular than the fly tying videos, because there's obviously lots of people doing fly tying videos. And, when you've got masters of fly tying like Davy McPhail, and there's a couple of others I can think of, Barry Ord Clark, he's got a channel called The Featherbender. I mean, it's a different level. It's like I'm Sunday League and they're at the Olympics sort of thing. Different sort of fly tying. But, so there was lots of people doing that. And I just thought, well, my real gift, if you like, was I do fish to a reasonable standard. And I think I can offer advice to people coming into the sport, on how to get started and how to improve. So those videos have become really popular, and I've enjoyed making them. They present new challenges because, people say, well, your filming's not great. I said, well, I'll have a word with my cameraman. and yeah, your script's not great. Yeah, I'll speak to the script writer. So I'm doing everything. I'm coming up with a concept. I'm trying to think what I'm going to say. I'm trying to work out where the camera's going to be. Is the sound right? And by the way, can you just catch a fish while you're doing all that at the same time? And so it's been a challenge, but it's been fun. You know, I've had a lot of laughs doing it, and the ones I really enjoy is when I did a collaboration with, I don't know, have you heard Reese on? I think Reese was on Seri's podcast. Seri Jones does a podcast as well,
right?
And Reese Wadley, right? He's a Welsh lad, and I think he's actually the current captain of the Welsh Stillwater team. I don't know if I've got that quite right, but he has a YouTube channel, and it's fantastic, and he does very similar sort of educational fishing videos, you know, how to do different techniques and methods. So I did a video with him, really enjoyed it. Great fun working with somebody who, you know, because I've done videos with my friends who've gone, oh, no, even Tim Joyce. I did a couple of videos with Tim, who's a guide, and he's chapping at the bit just to get fishing. He's mad for it, you know. He spent a week teaching people to fish, and then on his day off, he wants to go fishing. I mean, that speaks volumes to me, you know, if you're looking for somebody to guide you. But he was just chapping at the bit, whereas Reese, he understood that, okay, we're fishing, Reese, but I need this shot. So we need to just slow everything down. I know we're over a big, massive shoal of fish, but we're going to stop and we're going to just do this bit. And I would chat through the piece and he would do the filming. And I knew, because of his experience, that it was in focus, that the sound was good. You know, all the lighting was good. All the settings were right because he knows what he's doing. And likewise, when I was filming him, it was a very, very quick process. You know, I think we had the video in the can in about an hour and a half because we both knew what we needed. Whereas when you're out with someone that doesn't understand what you need, the process can take all day because you're going, no. And what people don't realise as well, and I was explaining this to Steve Cullen started doing some YouTube stuff now, and I said, yeah, but the sequence, so I'll shoot a sequence of catching a fish. So, and then you see me holding the fish up, and then you see me returning the fish underwater. That's 3 different fish. So to get that 1 6-second sequence, you've got to catch 3 fish. That's quite a lot of pressure, you know, as well as explain to people how you've just done all that. So it's good. It's a real challenge, but I really enjoy it. And I think when I look at videos that I'm producing now compared to when I started, I can see an improvement. And that's not because I bought a load of new kit. It's because I've learned how to use what I've got a wee bit better, you know.
The cool thing about what you're doing is, I think with these things, it's commitment. And, you know, everyone wants to do a vlog, everyone wants to do this, everyone wants to do that. But it's actually putting out content and then evolving that content as well. And even with this, you know, we've had a great conversation this morning about a variety of topics, but I'm coming up 100 of these now, and I can't do that same thing the whole time. So what I've looked to do is say, right, how can I evolve it? Can I take it onto the water? Can I package the podcast in a different way? How can I take that conversation in a different direction? And I've always said, you know, I used to put, I think it was 2 out a month. And then we had lockdown, so I decided, right, I'm going to put one out every week. And I've not missed that, and I won't miss that because I've committed myself to doing that. Because I think it's easy to say I'm going to do one every week, and then all of a sudden it starts being once a month, or then you suddenly go back to 2 a week, and then it goes back to once a month. I think it's consistency throughout that process. And I understand people have time and other considerations as well as fishing to throw into that. But I think like you've said, and the professionalism that you're applying to those videos, that you've got to put time aside to do that, to make sure that you have content there for people and for people to enjoy as well. And particularly through these difficult times, I've felt it was really important to do that. I'm like you, I don't want anything out of it. Okay, people might find the magazine as a result of it. I just like talking to people like yourself about fishing and discussing about it. I know it's not going to earn me millions of pounds. It doesn't earn me one single penny. I do it because I love it. And if it helps people along the way, that's really cool. But I think the key thing, if you're ever thinking down those lines, is the commitment. And I see that with yourself, and it's lovely to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, I think, it's great. I don't think there's much else I'm more passionate about than fly fishing, and bringing people in to the sport. I think it's every angler's responsibility. If you can help someone, then why wouldn't you help them? If I'm at a still water, and I've done this a few times. I've been making a video and I've just stopped and a guy's come up to me and said, "Well, how are you catching these fish?" I said, "I've been here all day. I can't catch a fish." And I said, "Well, let's see what you're doing and just put them on the right road." And it gives me a great sense of well-being. It's like feeding the pigeons, and they go away and they're just so great. Oh, well, that's fantastic. And then just giving them a couple of flies, and they're thinking, "God, that's brilliant." I've been coming here and I've not done so well. I'm catching one or two fish, and then it can be quite disconcerting when, and we've all been there. You've looked across the water and there's that one smart arse pulling fish out after fish out. And, after 30 years, I've kind of evolved into that smart arse that I know when I'm on them, I can catch them pretty much at will. But that doesn't come easy. That's an experience thing and knowing where to go and when to go. But being able to help people is a privilege. And I think if they go away thinking, well, I'm going fishing again next week because I know what I'm doing now. I've got the flies. I know how to fish them. It's great, And I get a great sense of satisfaction from. I had one a while back during lockdown, and a guy said, "Well, I used to tie my own flies, but I just couldn't be bothered. But after watching a few of your videos, it's really given me an appetite to get back in. I've been up the loft. I've got all my kit. I just want to ask a few questions about tools and, what do I need to get to really get started?" And I just think that's great. If somebody's getting back into a hobby or just starting out, it's great that I've managed to help them do that.
Yeah, I'm similar. That I get a lot of messages from people regarding the podcast or the magazine, and it's thrilling when you've impacted someone in a positive way and it's inspired them and made them love something that we love so much, even more, which is really, really cool aspect of it. But we've done well over an hour now, Lindsay. If people want to, if they haven't watched it already, where do they find your YouTube channel and your other bits and pieces should they want to find them?
Well, if you want to go to the YouTube channel, it's just type Lindsay Simpson into the search, Lindsay Simpson and fly fishing. If you just type Lindsay Simpson, you might get Lindsay Lohan, and you don't want to be watching that if you're looking for fly fishing. I also have a website, which is iflyfish.info, which has been sadly neglected since YouTube's come along. But you can find me there, and I'm on Facebook. You can't miss this ugly mush, can you, really?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today, Lindsay. We covered some real interesting topics that I think listeners are going to really, really enjoy as well. And we covered lots of ground. We talked about a lot of stuff. Your passion and love for fly fishing comes across. Your honesty as well is greatly appreciated. So thank you again, Lindsay, so much for taking the time. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
Thanks very much, Pete. It's great to actually be on something that I listen to myself.
Thank you so much. Everyone, this has been the Fly Culture Podcast. Thank you so much for listening to this one. Like I said, we've covered lots of ground in this that I think you're going to really enjoy listening to. And as ever, there'll be another podcast next week. But thanks so much for tuning in, and there'll be plenty more soon. Thank you.
The Fly Culture Podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.